Hi friends, we would love the privilege of telling you the story of our church. It's not just a church that is what you see at the moment. It has a history and it has a present and it has a future. And it really is a story of God's goodness and His grace, and it's a story of people and their sacrifice and their faith and their perseverance. And it started in 1979 with an evangelist who loved Jesus and proclaimed Jesus. And he saw about 80 people gathered together as a result of proclaiming Christ. And after that, the elders got together and they called a pastor from Bloemfontein, Sid and Bev Rothman. And the story of the church is the story of God's goodness. People were saved. There was a youth that was formed. The church grew. From that growth, they planted out many really quality men and women. Kieran and Glenda planted a church in East London. Bason and Tanya Nell went out and took over the leadership of the church in George. Adrian and Heidi planted a church in Providence, and then Michael and Adi DeFay planted out in Oudtshoorn. And amazing stories of the Spirit of God coming upon the youth and them being baptized in the Spirit. And many people today testify of God's hand upon them and them coming out of our church. And so really grateful to God. The church bought land where it currently is, and the intention was for the church to be a bridge between the township and the current community. And they built the church. It's owner built, and you'll see pictures and hear stories of them digging trenches and building the church and building the offices, and great stories of faith and of courage. And we really are grateful, this generation, for what the previous generation sowed into to give us what we have today. And after 20 years of faithful service, Sid and Bev decided to hand over the leadership of the church to Tash and myself. We really, as we took over, encountered many difficulties. Firstly, there were numerous break-ins. Over 70 break-ins happened within 2 years, and that had a massive impact on us financially, but in every aspect. It was also, I think, a difficult transition for the church, and many people, for various reasons, chose to move on. And we went through a stage of, I think, great trials. I think the church came very close to actually shutting its doors, and we perhaps began to doubt the word and the promises of God over us. And in the kindness of God, we managed to persevere and just stick around. And in about 2007, around about that time, we started to see some signs of growth. And I remember a lady called Bubbles from the township came and she visited us, and she said she really enjoyed the service and she would be back and she would bring some friends. And the next week she brought 10 of her friends, and that was really the start of God rebuilding His bride. And it was on the heart of the church, and indeed the heart of Tash and I and the elders, to see a community of rich and poor, black and white, young and old come together. We really had a hope that Christ could break down the barriers that we saw in our country, that He was big enough and the work of Christ was big enough to bring together young and old, black and white, rich and poor, educated and uneducated, to authentically love one another. And so you join today a church that has about 15 different nations gather, different languages are spoken, many different cultures come into this melting pot called Joy to the Nations. And it is a story of God's grace and His goodness, and it is just a story that displays His glory. And you bring who you are, you bring your culture, you bring your diversity, you bring your character, you bring your uniqueness into this story, and you add to this story. You add a unique color and fragrance and richness to this amazing painting and this amazing canvas that God is currently doing. And so it's important that you know the story because it has a history, and you have the privilege of helping us paint a future that would display God's glory and His goodness.